We have thousands of spirits around us at any given moment. Spirit's always communicating with us. It's whether or not we're tuned to the channel to receive it. There's always an emotional component in place before any kind of medical condition arises. What I see is the spirit's in the main part of us, and the body's inside the spirit. Then there's a container. That energy that makes up the body and the spirit is inside, and I call that the energy field membrane.
Guy here, welcome to my Let It In podcast. My beautiful guest today is Julie Ryan, and I connected with her through San Ching, who I speak to a lot in person, myself, who's been on the podcast as well. Anyway, long story short, Julie is a beautiful soul. She's a medical intuitive, and we get into the bulk of the conversation was about connecting with spirit, our guides, and also how our energy fields impact us, our health and our lives in more ways than one, and how we can rectify these things as well. It's a fascinating conversation. Like I said, Julie's a beautiful soul, and I'm excited to bring her to the podcast today, especially if you've not met her before in this format. She will also be doing an in-person weekend on teaching people on how to connect to spirit. So I believe that's in Atlanta, the US. Obviously, I won't be there. I'm here in Australia, but I have a direct link below if that interests you and you want to hang out with Julie for a weekend, learning how to connect with spirit and so much more. There's a link below in the description, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or whatever, if you want to check that out as well. One last thing as well, you might have heard me speaking about our HEARTT guide. That's something that you can print out and stick it on the fridge. It's very beneficial. It's one of the kind of core step teachings that we teach within our work as well. So there's a free link below as well if you want to check that out as well. Anyway, enjoy this podcast. Hopefully I'll get to meet you someday somewhere in person around the world. Much love from me, and I'll see you soon. Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. What a delight to get to be with you today.
Likewise. And it's been wonderful to connect with a mutual friend of ours, San Ching. We were just talking off air about it, but I've been slowly going through your website and your materials and everything. And yeah, I'm very excited to see how this unfolds, and been blown away by what you do. And I noticed as well, you've got had a lot of businesses through over the years as well, which is fascinating. And I'm keen to get in how the business world crossed over into the spiritual world as well, because I really think we need it more than ever at this point in time, to be exploring and bringing that spirituality and that self into, everything that we do, not just kind of, it sometimes feels like without you're cheerleading on our own over to the left when it really should be encompassed by everyone. That's my feeling anyway. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Let's bring it back. If you were at an intimate dinner party right now and somebody asked you, what were you doing for a living these days? How would you reply?
I tell them I'm a businesswoman and an inventor of surgical devices who learned how to do woo-woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. And they look at me and they go, what? It's a conversation starter. And people go, oh, okay, tell me more.
For sure. What kind of surgical devices? And was there a correlation, like it exploring that world, that the spirit world started to come in your sphere?
No, I was doing the medical stuff first.
Right.
Being in the hospital supply industry and being a businesswoman long before I even knew woo-woo was a thing. And I think we all channel information. We all get guidance from spirit, and we just don't realize it. I have a communications degree, and I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world. So how's that work? Well, obviously I was getting ideas from somewhere, and people say to me, well, were you a doctor or a nurse or an engineer? And I said, no, but I know how to hire them. And I got the ideas, and you can always hire an engineer to draw it up, and somebody who's well-versed and trained in manufacturing. And So that's what I did.
Wow. And when did spirit start to come into it then?
About 30 years ago, I was raised Catholic, went through 12 years of Catholic schools. And so, typical organized religion learned. And I think the Catholics do a great job of teaching little children about angels and saints and loved ones go to heaven when they die, and God and Jesus and the Virgin Mary and all of that. And so we really have a foundation as little children that some of this exists out there, and it's not as big of a leap for some of us that are raised in religions like that. And so about 30 years ago, Guy, I have a friend who gave me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by a woman named Carolyn Mace. And she called herself a medical intuitive. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? I'd never heard that term before. And I had, as I mentioned, I'd been in the hospital supply industry for over a decade at that point, and I wanted to know more. And back then, we didn't have the internet yet. So I did the old fashioned thing and I went to a bookstore and I found a book called Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan, who's a former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable English for the non scientific mind. That would be me. And she was using and teaching how to use energy frequencies to help people heal. So I was helping people heal through doctors and nurses and other medical providers and the devices that I was creating and manufacturing. But it really intrigued me about the energy healing part of the equation. And I called her school and I asked if somebody was teaching this stuff in my area. And sure enough, fortunately, there was a graduate of her school that studied with for 6 years. And here we are.
Barbara Brennan, what a legend. I've got a few of her books that I've gone through on Audible
Yeah.
over the years, have been recommended it. It's pretty
Yeah.
deep stuff. Like, take us through that then, because people, I think, energy healing and the word energy is quite common. It doesn't feel woo-woo so much these days. But what kind of principles are you learning when you go in to do something like that? And what's the kind of the guiding principles behind how something like this works and how it affects our bodies and why we should be looking at it?
Well, first of all, our mutual friend Sun Ching taught me that Wu means source in Taoism. I didn't know that. And I love the word woo woo because I think it's fun and spirit's pure love and fun and joy. And so, how it works is I raise my vibrational level to a level of spirit because we're all spirits attached to a body having a human experience. And when we're attached to a body, we vibrate more slowly simply because the body has mass. So I raise my vibrational level. This is what I teach my students to do. I do it in a nanosecond, turn it on and off at will. And it's not a requirement to meditate for an hour, twirl 3 times, jump on your left foot and raise your right hand. Now you can do that if you want, but it's not necessary. And then I in my mind's eye, watch a laser beam come from my body and hook into the person with whom I'm working, whether they call into my show. I do a live show every Thursday night called Ask Julie Ryan, and it's live streamed on YouTube as well as on podcast networks. And people call in from all over
I
the
bet.
world, and I can scan them. We can talk to their dead grandma. I can scan your cat. We can do past lives. We can see how close to death somebody is. So I will watch a laser beam in my mind's eye. I go to them, hook into them, and then I envision shooting energy from their feet up through the top of their head. And it's as if I'm looking at an X ray or a CT scan or an MRI. And something's identified. And then immediately thereafter, there will be some type of energetic healing that will begin. And that can take the form of something getting added, something getting removed. I watch procedures all the time in my mind's eye that emulate what I saw in surgery for all those years when I was inventing devices, testing prototypes with my team, things like that. Sometimes I see healings that utilize methodologies and devices that haven't been invented yet. And regardless of what I'm seeing in my mind's eye, I'm describing it to my client because I want them to envision what I'm seeing. When they do that, it helps integrate the healing into their body. Couple of important points here. It's spirit working through me and with me to help that person heal themselves, because nobody ever heals anybody else. No doctor, no medical provider, no shaman, no healer like me. We help that person heal themselves. Think about if you have a big cut in your leg and you go to the hospital, they're going to suture it up, they're going to stitch it up. But the doctor doesn't make your skin grow back.
Mm.
You make your own skin grow back. And that's how all of this works. So that's number one. Number two, the other thing that makes it really fun, Guy, is spirit will send me analogies that are oftentimes really funny. And I may tell somebody, well, your elbow looks like whipped cream or something crazy like that. But it's to give us a human frame of reference so that we can integrate the healing into our own bodies. So it's really fun. We laugh a lot. It's full of joy, and it's quite amazing the healings that
I
happen.
bet. And honestly, you make it sound, because I want to say you've been doing this for, like you said, 30 years, right? And you said that you can just turn it off and on. How
Yeah.
does one get to that mastery? Is there an element of, as you explored and healed yourself, then that depth of connection to spirit strengthens? Like how does one bridge that gap?
Well, that's what I teach in my trainings, and it's a transfer of energy from me to my students. It's 90% transfer of energy, 10% technique, and it's a muscle. All of my trainings have practice groups with them. My big training in Atlanta, October 24th through the 26th here in 2025, in about 6 weeks. We'll have people come in from all over the world that will be there, and they'll be able to do this stuff in the first hour or 2. Everybody has the ability, it's just a matter of developing and enhancing it. And so I say it's 10% technique. We're going to figure out what's the best way for you to do this. And then we're going to help you practice it, because people that take my angelic attendant training, they get practice groups for life for free with the class. And right now we have 9 a week.
Wow.
And that's where your skills really ramp up. We're trying to cover all the different time zones and different days and different times of the day for people who work outside of the home. Some people like to do practice groups in the morning, some like to do them in the evenings, and then we've got a bunch of different time zones we're trying to cover. But it's been really fascinating to watch how people's skills really ramp up in the practice groups, because they're getting validation for the information they're receiving. And we all know we can read a book. Like, think about when you were learning to drive a car. You can read a book, you can ride in a car with somebody else driving, you can watch a movie or a video, but until you're behind the wheel and you've done it several times, you don't really get it. And that's with everything. It's the same with this. So all of my trainings have practice groups that come with them, because I believe that's a really super, super important part of learning how to do woo woo.
Beautiful. Yeah, reps in the gym for sure.
Exactly.
Now, you've obviously witnessed the medical industry, and you do what you do now. And I'm fascinated from all what you've witnessed and what you've experienced over the years working with energy. How much do you feel the energy perspective needs to be addressed for the physical perspective to reorganize or readjust itself? I'm trying to choose the right words here. So, for instance, if we've got skin issues, or if there's something not quite right with the organ in the body, or we feel it, or something keeps manifesting in physical form, how much do you feel is a direct correlation to an energetic part of us that we're not even aware of?
100%. There's always an emotional component in place before any kind of medical condition arises. And the emotional component causes an energy block, a la Eastern medicine, acupressure, acupuncture, clear the block, get the chi to move. And the energy block in turn causes a leak in what I call the energy field membrane. So we're always leaking power before any kind of medical condition arises. It's the most important part of a healing, in my opinion. When I hook into somebody, and let's say you mentioned gut issues, they've got some kind of GI issues. Well, I'll see their stomach, I'll see what's going on. They may have leaky gut, they may have something else going on. They may have an ulcer, they may have something else going on in their GI tract. And so that'll get healed. And then at the end of the healing, we'll do the energy field membrane portion. When I have somebody call into my show, it's very fast and they only get to ask one question because I'm trying to get as many people on as possible on my live call in shows on Thursday nights. And it's Friday morning your time. I love it when I have guests from Australia say, "Oh, it's like a sci-fi movie. We're talking to you real time in the future." And that's really fun. But for the most part, people are calling in from Europe or from North America. And and so we'll watch the healing, I'll describe what's going on. When I have 5 graduates that work with me too, just to get more time allotted for people to have appointments. When I'm working with somebody for an hour, they'll give me a list of all the things that they wanna explore. Let's say they wanna do medical stuff, and then they wanna talk to their dead Aunt Susie, and they wanna talk to their dog, Fluffy's spirit, and they wanna do a past life thing, and we'll cram as much in together from my buffet of psychicness as we can fill the hour, with a multitude of things. Because once you connect with spirit, you can do it all. And so that's what I teach. But to answer your question, something will be identified, there'll be healing. Something will be identified, there'll be healing. I always go in blind first, Guy, because I want to see where the energy is going to go. It's going to go to the most needed area first. And sometimes that's asymptomatic. And sometimes it's the root cause of a whole bunch of different symptoms that nobody's tied together. So we do that. And then at the end, when I have them for an hour, we'll work on their energy field membrane. May I explain about that?
Please, yeah.
Okay, so we're all spirits attached to a body having a human experience. And I was taught in Catholic schools that the spirit's someplace in the chest. Spirit, soul, same meaning. I use spirit. I think soul has more of a religious connotation, at least to me. So I use the word spirit. And so I was taught the spirit is someplace in the chest, but that's not what I perceive. Rather, what I see is the spirit's in the main part of us, and the body's inside the spirit. So if you think about an old master's painting of a religious figure, oftentimes they're depicted with a halo around their head or around their whole body. That's their spirit, it's their energy field, it's their aura. It's all the same thing. And then there's a container that energy that makes up the body and the spirit is inside, and I call that the energy field membrane. It reminds me of really thin, stretchy plastic wrap. So imagine that you have a plastic bag around you, a very thin plastic wrap. And so when there's a tear or a hole in there, again, caused by an energy block, in turn caused by an emotional event, there's a leak. And it always precedes any kind of medical condition. An analogy I like to use is think of going to the pet store and buying a goldfish. They're going to put it in a plastic bag of water in order for you to take it home. Well, if you have a picture of that in your mind's eye, the fish represents our body, the water represents our spirit, because again, the body's inside the spirit, and the plastic bag represents our energy field membrane. If there's a pinhole in that plastic bag and water's draining out a drop at a time, for a long time, that fish is going to be just fine. However, when enough water drains out, that fish is going to be in trouble. And that's what happens to the human body.
We're like leaky buckets.
Yes. Most people have a leak in their energy field membrane. usually from the age of about 16 or so.
What causes them?
An emotional event, either in this lifetime or a past lifetime. And it may be something benign, like somebody called you a bad name when you were little and it hurt your feelings. And we look at that as adults and we say, well, that was no big deal. But it was a big deal to your 3-year-old little self when it happened. Or it may be something dramatic. Doesn't matter what it was, because as soon as we illuminate it, it eradicates that energy block, allows the energy filled membrane to instantly heal, allows the body to go back to working on full power, helps the body
Mm.
regain and maintain health. If it's a past life event, we'll get where it was when it was, a little bit about what happened, and then we'll correlate it with what's going on in their current life. It's always fascinating. Past life stuff's really fun to do.
Yeah, I bet. And to the with past lives and things like that, and that energy membrane you speak of, do they have a purpose of being there? Is there a deeper lesson for the spirit to be learning from these things, or are they just random things that we've just haven't addressed in our lives? Well, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. It seems to me, after having done this tens of thousands of times over the years and only doing it as a career for the past 7 or 8 years, what I've found is that there's a semblance of a script and many scripts that we bring in each lifetime. And we want to explore and experience that script. The script is very general, like you want to be a teacher. Well, there are 50 bazillion ways you can be a teacher. You can be a teacher as a friend, a spouse, a parent, a teacher in a school, lots of different age ranges. You can be a corporate teacher. You can be an online teacher. You can be a whatever kind of teacher. And so that's the basic script. And I'll see that script repeat throughout multiple lifetimes, different variables, different time, different place, different set of circumstances, same basic script. Let's say back to the you want to be a teacher. So you want to be a teacher, and you're a teacher in 1927 in New York City, and you're a phys ed teacher. You're teaching kids physical education. And so fast forward, now in this lifetime, you're a teacher in Australia and you're teaching fifth graders math. Well, same basic script, different variables that are going to give you a different perspective on that script. Think of it like this way. If you think of Hamlet, Hamlet was written in 1602, and how many times do you think it's been performed since Shakespeare wrote it?
Mm.
Who knows? But you think about it's the same script, but where was it performed? In what language? In what year? What was happening in the world? Who were the actors? Who was the set designer? Who was the director? All those different variables are going to create a different experience of the same script. And that's my impression of how all of our lifetimes interact with one another.
Yeah, beautiful and beautiful. And where do you feel our guides come into it, and angelic beings and support team almost, if you like, if you start tuning into that and become aware of it? What is the role? Do we all have them? Who shows up and when? How do they
Yeah.
support us?
Yeah. They're around us all the time. We have thousands of spirits around us at any given moment. Angels, deceased loved ones, spirit guides, other loved ones from all of our past lives. We each get a guardian angel when we're first incarnated, when we first come into being, and that angel stays with us in all of our lifetimes, which I think is really sweet, and stays with us in between lifetimes. Because back to those scripts that we're exploring, once we're done exploring them, then and we're ready to go back to heaven. Okay, we die, we go back to heaven, and what do? We plan our next adventure on, oh, okay, I want to go back and I want to look at being a teacher in this part of the world in this day and age and teaching this and have those experiences. So our guardian angels with us throughout all of our lifetimes.
And for everyone listening to this, how can we best utilize them as support? Because we don't even stop to become aware enough of any other
Yeah.
presence. That's
Just ask them when you need help. They're not going to interfere. They're going to send us ideas, and we'll think that they are our ideas because they're just thoughts that come into our head. And all you have to do is just ask them for help. We have access to universal energy at any given moment. All we have to do is just ask. And spirit's always communicating with us. It's whether or not we're tuned to the channel to receive it. Similar to satellite TV. Satellite TV is broadcasting hundreds of shows all at the same time. And it depends on what station you're tuned to as to what show's going to be received. Furthermore, they're broadcasting all of those shows. And when it's good weather, you can receive any show you want through that satellite feed. However, if there's a big storm that's passing over your house, that broadcast may be interrupted because the signal isn't being received. So I equate it to spirit is a high vibration because it doesn't have the density of a body. And when we want to communicate with spirit, we need to be in a high vibration beyond that channel, like 102.5 on your radio. Whereas most of us are living on a lower density channel where I use the analogy of old time country music, whiny songs complaining about mama, the truck, and the dog. I call those the I feel crappy channels where you can't receive spirit communication on the I feel crappy channels because the vibration's too low. You're trying to listen to classical music on the whiny country music station, and that's not what they're broadcasting. So it's really that simple. It's just a matter of raising your vibrational level.
how does one do that? Like it's interesting because I'm in front of hundreds of people every month, and a lot of them come in because we hold space here in Australia, and many of them come in tuned into that I feel crappy channel, and they
Yeah,
verbalize it, they speak about it, they reinforce it, they tell their friends about it, and they're
right.
just in it all the time without even the awareness of there's something beyond it. And then they'll come and just expect a healing, and I'm just going to carry on with the I feel crappy channel. And or this is almost as if we've been conditioned to take a pill to numb something that doesn't want to be felt around that.
Right.
So I could love to hear your experience from getting out of that crappy channel into that higher vibration where spirit resides.
Stand in the Superman pose,
Ah,
Superwoman, Wonder Woman pose, hands on your hips, legs spread apart. And university-based research shows that gives you serotonin and a dopamine hit, makes you feel better, and it lowers your cortisol levels, lowers your stress hormone levels. It's a nanosecond to get into that position. Interestingly enough, if you watch the award shows, like the actors and all those guys on the award shows, when they're talking to the people as they're walking in on the red carpet, a lot of them, especially the women, will stand in that Superman pose or a modified Superman pose with maybe one hand on their hip, and their legs will be maybe one out in front of the other, and they're posing. Well, they're taught to do that because it raises their feel good hormones and brain chemicals, and it lowers their stress level. It's a really easy way. Another way to do it is to start asking questions, because curiosity is based in love. Curiosity is a high vibration. When we're curious, it's interesting to us. We want to know more, and oftentimes we find it as fun. And spirit's all about fun. Fun's a high vibration.
yeah, I definitely know about curious because my 5-year-old daughter, she doesn't stop asking me questions at the moment. Everything has got a question around it.
Yeah.
It makes me think of that straight away when we're in that resonance of love, which they are.
Well, and the other thing is, you think about babies and little kids, their natural state is happiness,
Mm.
unless they're hungry or they need to be changed or they got a boo-boo, they've hurt themselves or their tummy hurts or something. I mean, that's our natural state, is joy and love. And then we're taught different behaviors as we grow. But all you have to do is look at a child or a baby, and they're brilliant. Each generation comes in more advanced than the next. I'm sure your daughter was probably able to use your iPhone better than I could when she was a toddler, even before she could talk.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing to watch them and witness them and nurture them in this space. It really is. I always say they're my biggest teachers at the moment, for sure.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
always.
yeah. So a common theme or question that tends to come through on the podcast as well, or from people in general, is leaning into that intuitive muscle and leaning into that development of self to trust that relationship. And how do you distinguish between the noise in your head to actually clear intuitive hits and but more importantly then acting upon them, because it can feel so
Yeah.
daunting because we're so used to a sense of control and holding on to things as opposed to letting it breathe and be free and flowing with it per se.
Right. Well, when we ask something of spirit, we either make a statement or we ask a question. The answer is going to come in, it's going to feel like a thought in our head. How we know that's from spirit is it comes in as fast as you can snap your finger, just boom, immediately. Sometimes before you've even finished thinking the thought. And that really trips people up at times. They'll say, "Well, I didn't even finish with my thought, and I had another thought coming into my head." Well, you got to remember time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human creation, our linear thinking minds. That's a human creation. So spirit already has what we're saying, whether it be a question or a statement, and they're responding to us oftentimes. Some ground rules, spirits pure love and joy. Spirit's never going to say anything abusive or offensive or demeaning or any of that. And spirit communicates in numerals and it's code, it's numeric. And it reminds me of during World War II, the Allies were able to break the Nazi code and it helped them know what their plans were and it helped win the war. When spirit communication comes into our head, our brains decode it. And it can come in the form of an image or a word or a sentence or once you do it for a long time, like I have, we just have a conversation with Aunt Susie in heaven. And Aunt Susie's really chatty, and Aunt Susie's just going on and on and on. I always tell my clients and my callers, I can't control what Aunt Susie said when she was alive. I couldn't control it then, and I can't control what she says, what her spirit says in heaven. But they're going to give us information that's going to let us know that it's really them. I had a client earlier today who had cabinets opening and closing in her kitchen on their own. It scared the bejeebas out of her. And she said, "Oh my gosh, before I heard you talk, I thought, well, I got evil spirits in my kitchen." And she said, then I realized, well, what I say is there are no evil spirits, which is what I believe. And what I know to be true. And so she said, "Who was that? Was that my grandma Betty?" And I said, "No, it was your grandfather. And he was looking for a bowl to get some ice cream," is what he told me. Grandma Betty showed me pink and red roses. And so I said to her, "Did your grandfather like ice cream?" And she laughed. She said, "Oh my God, he was a fiend for ice cream." I said, "Well, it doesn't mean he's eating the ice cream in heaven. It means that's a sign he's sending to you to let you know that's really him. Because that doesn't mean anything to me, but it meant something to her." Furthermore, her grandmother, I said, "What's with the red and the pink roses? Did your grandmother have a garden? Do you have a garden?" She said, "We both did. And I learned how to grow roses from my grandmother."
Hmm.
So there you go. They're going to send us signs and symbols and things that they're going to talk about that are going to let us know that it's really them with whom we're conversing. And people love that. It gives them so much comfort, especially if they're grieving. And it lets them know that, yeah, my mom's still around me. I can't see her. I can't touch her the way I could when she was in a body, but I know she's still here and I can communicate with her.
Yeah, beautiful. What? it's just let me go off on a tangent a bit, but we might as well talk about it now. Is that transition of passing over and going
Yeah.
into spirit? I mean, what do you think or feel is the evolution of ourselves, our soul, our spirits, and this reincarnation, and why is spirit somewhere around, or why aren't they off somewhere else and evolving more in heaven or whatever it might be? Like, how do you see all this working?
Well, there are lots of schools of thought, Guy, that say that we live multiple lifetimes
Mm.
concurrently. And that just makes my head want to explode. I just think, what? And and I have come to the realization that it's feasible. Do I understand it? No. Will I understand it when I get back to heaven? Absolutely. And that's where I go with things that I don't understand. I don't think we're supposed to understand everything about the spirit world when we're in human form. We're here to have the human experience. We have the spirit experience when we're in heaven all the time, but we're here to have a human experience and to explore and expand and create, because that's when the creation happens, is when we're in human form. In spirit form, everything's just great all the time. I'm not saying heaven's boring, but that's why they're also often clamoring to come back to the human incarnation, because they see it as fun because we get to create things. And as far as when somebody's dying, were you asking that question too? What happens when somebody's
Please,
dying?
you want to elaborate on it anyway? Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of information most of us know about the afterlife and near death experiences and how to grieve and the phases of grief and things like that, but not a lot of information out there about what happens when somebody's dying. And that's what my book, Angelic Attendants, what really happens as we
Okay.
transition from this life into the next, talks about. Excuse me. And it has illustrations in it of what I call the 12 phases of transition. And that's a configuration of how we're surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as we're transitioning. Everybody goes through the 12 phases of transition, regardless of if they die instantly, like in the case of a homicide or suicide, or die over a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, months, even years. Because we go back to the time doesn't exist in the spirit world, time's a human creation concept. And people find that so comforting. Furthermore, university based research shows that 90% of people at the end of their lives see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're transitioning in the last 6 months of their lives, either in visions or dreams. And most of us, when we hear about that, we think, oh, that was just the morphine they gave grandma from the hospice nurses, and she was hallucinating. No, she wasn't. She was actually able to see and communicate with her deceased mother, perhaps who'd been gone for 50 years.
Mm.
And hallucinations are normally disturbing to a person. Visions of deceased loved ones and pets are comforting, and that's part of the research that's shown how people see these spirits, which really validates what I talk about in the 12 phases of transition.
Yeah. I remember a quote from Wayne Dyer that sat with me years ago, and I think he got it from the Tao Te Ching. I'm not sure, but he said, "To fully live, you must die first," and then, and I believe he was referring almost to the ego death or to accept death, and then you can fully live, and that's really sat with me ever since. And it's kind of
Yeah.
it lurks at the it's just with me that thought, because then it really allows me to lean in and have the courage to live more with heart, more authenticity and contribution, which I think is really important, while we're here.
And when we know that we're escorted to heaven by angels and there are all of our deceased loved ones and pet spirits there waiting for us, they're around us as we're dying, and then they're in heaven once we pass through the pearly gates. My feeling about that is okay, I don't want to die today. My motto is happy, healthy, dead. And yet, if that's the worst thing that can happen to me is I die and I'm escorted to heaven by angels and all my loved ones are there, okay. It gives me more courage, to your point a minute ago, to try things and create things and really enjoy my life, the one that I have here on earth right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what has it done for you leaning into this work on your own personal experience over the years, leaning it, how you live your
It's
life?
really ramped up my joy, the joy that I feel, and given me the opportunity to meet amazing people from around the world, both as clients and colleagues, like you, getting to meet you. I mean, how else would I have ever met
Oh,
you?
true. Yeah.
Kind of a thing. Yeah. So it's been the most fun thing I've ever done. I've founded 9 companies in 5 industries in my career. And this is the first thing I've ever done where I don't have a business plan. And people say, well, what are your goals? I say, I don't know. I don't have any. And they'd say, well, what are you going to do with this? I don't know. I'm just following where I'm being led. And I do have a fun story about how angelic attendance came about. May I share
Please, of
that?
course.
The first time I saw these 12 phases of transition was when my own mother was dying in 2002, and I'd never been around anybody at the end of their life before. I'd never been around anybody that was dying, so it was a new experience for me. And I felt like the lady of justice here in America. It's a scale. On one side, my heart was breaking because my mother was dying very unexpectedly. And on the other side, I was seeing all this glorious stuff happening in the spirit world. And so it helped balance the two different situations out. So when I was with my mom, I got to see these phases of transition, then got to see them in many other people. One day I was with my mentor and she was doing a healing on me. And when that happens, I'm laying on a table and I'm covered in a blanket. I'm all snuggly and all my deceased loved ones' spirits line both sides of the table because they participate in the healing. Even my dog Katie is there. She's on her hind legs. She's got her little paws, on the edge of the table and she's participating. And one day, Guy, this spirit of a dead pope shows up and he had his pope hat on and his shepherd's rod and the whole 9 yards. And I said to him, well, who are you? And he said, I'm Clement. And I said, I'm really sorry, but I never heard of a Pope Clement. And he laughed and he said, well, I'm number 6. I was number 6. And I said, okay, great. How may I help you? And he said, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies because it's been so bastardized over the millennia. People are so afraid, and there's nothing to be afraid of. And you know that. You've seen it a lot of times. And I said, well, thank you so much for stopping by, but I'm really not interested because I'm a businesswoman and people will think I'm nuts if I talk about that out in public. And he laughed and he said, well, actually, everything you've ever done in your life has prepared you for this to be able to teach the world really what happens when somebody's dying. And I said, well, again, thank you so much. I'm really not interested. Thanks for stopping by. And so I go to get in my car to leave a little bit later, Guy. And just for kicks, I looked up on my phone Pope Clement the Sixth. Well, come to find out, this guy was in office during the Black Plague, and he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I thought, Ryan, you can't make that up. And so, fast forward a couple of years, I just went on with my life. And I did write angelic attendance, but I didn't do anything with it. So I was at church, and the priest from the altar during his sermon said, wouldn't it be nice if somebody could tell us if really we're greeted by angels and our loved ones and escorted to heaven? And I'm getting elbowed by my husband and my son who are on either side of me. And I thought, really, God, from the pulpit, you're giving me grief about this? Seriously? Okay. I'll consider it. And then I took another step and I put up the askjulieryan.com website and all of that. And I thought, oh, I just hope this just doesn't tank my businesses. And because I was worried about what people would
Mm.
think, of me doing this woo woo stuff. So I gave a talk at this business conference guy, and it was mostly men, and they were C suite executives. And afterwards, this guy came up to me and he had his iPad open and it was tuned to AskJulieRyan.com. And I said, he goes, "Is this you?" And I'm thinking, oh, here we go. And my picture, was on the cover on the homepage. And I said, "Well, yes, it is." And inside I'm thinking, oh, get ready. And he said, "Well, can we sit together at lunch? I'd like to hear more about this." And I am smiling and I'm saying, "Sure." And inside I'm thinking, "Oh, I'm just going to get drilled, through this whole lunch hour." Fast forward, we go to lunch. It's a table of 8. I will always remember this. And it was 7 C-suite executive men and me at this table. None of them wanted to talk about business stuff. They just wanted to talk about woo-woo. And I thought, "Okay, God. All right, I'm in 100%." And then that really was the catalyst to change things for me.
That's amazing. You took the words out of my mouth because I was going to ask you, when did you decide to, just embrace
Yeah.
this? What was the biggest lesson from that then, moving forward? Because I see so many people, including myself, grapple with it sometimes, just being
Yeah.
unashamedly yourself, your authentic self, and speaking about what you believe to be true. And there's nothing wrong with that, but yet we're so feared of being judged or dismissed by our peers in
Yeah.
our world, aren't we? You know?
Well, when the information that I receive gets validated, it has tens of thousands of times. Couple of things in particular about angelic attendance and what happens. About phase 5 or 6, the spirit exits the body through the top of the head. It hangs on. It looks like a speech bubble in a cartoon. And so there are spirits around and angels around this spirit, and they form a circle and then they open into a horseshoe and then a straight line across, let's say, the foot of the bed, just for conversation's sake. Somebody's in a bed. About phase 5 or 6, there are 2 additional angels that show up on either side of the spirit bubble. And I saw this with my mother. And I thought, I have no clue what these angels are going to do, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. By the way, angels appear to me like a Catholic schoolgirl angel, big, big wings, white gown, rope belt, bare feet. Is that what angels really look like? It's what I was taught they look like. So, somebody growing up in an indigenous culture in the Amazon perhaps sees angel energy as just a ball of purple fog. Spirits are always going to show up in a way that it's going to make sense to us based on our human frame of reference. So these angels showed up with my mom, and their wings started to move about phase 9, Guy. And it reminded me of a giant owl, very slow, rhythmic, silent movement with these angels' wings. And that movement created a vortex above my mother's head. And I could see it, I could feel it, and I could hear it. And it reminded me of being in the car wash at the end when they turn the dryer on and it's sucking all the water off your car. And so I knew that that was going to play a role in my mother's spirit detaching from her body. And in fact, that's what I witnessed and have seen thousands of times since, that the spirit exits through this vortex and then is escorted to heaven by the angels. So when I was writing angelic attendance, I thought, I'm just going to do some research on owl wings vortex. Come to find out, there's this aeronautical engineering phenomenon that every pilot knows about, and it's called the wingtip vortex. And it's how the air passes over and under the wings. And when these vortices form underneath the wings, it causes lift. Every jet, every plane, every bird, every bug, everything that flies has these wingtip vortices that cause lift. If you do an internet search on wingtip vortex, you will see thousands of aeronautical engineering drawings, pictures, diagrams, articles. And I thought, oh my word. I was watching these angels' wings move. I saw this vortex form. I watched my mother's spirit go through it. So it was a spiritual thing happening in the human world that I could see, hear, and feel. And it had the same lift ability as what happens underneath planes and jets and birds and bugs. That was validation number one. Number two, at my mother's funeral, there's a prayer said at the end of every Roman Catholic funeral called In Paradisum. And in Latin, translated into English, In Paradisum is into paradise. And it talks about how the angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. Well, I'd heard that prayer so many times because I'd been to so many Catholic funerals in my time. And at my mother's funeral, I heard it probably for the first time and really paid attention. And I thought, oh my goodness, I just saw that happen with my mother. The 12, what I now call the 12 phases of transition. So again, when I was writing Angelic Attendants, I did an internet search to find out where did that prayer originate. And what I learned, Guy, is that it began as a 5th century Gregorian chant. So perhaps it took till the 5th century till somebody was well educated enough, they could read and write, that they could write down what happens when somebody's dying into this prayer. And certainly some of the most learned people were men in the 5th century, and they were in synagogues and monasteries. They were the scribes. And it made me think, well, perhaps since the beginning of time, people have been able to see this. And just as we've become more well educated and proof based, we want to see proof. But I believe people have been able to see the 12 phases of transition since the beginning of time. So I love when science catches up with woo woo because woo woo's been around a whole lot longer. Woo woo's been here since the beginning.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's, Western society doesn't encourage these connections at all, does it? Really, the pace of life, the amount of technology and information bombarded at us, and it's so easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of daily life and not actually stop, pause, and reconnecting with ourselves and nurturing these gifts that I feel we all have, really.
Well, I believe more and more people are getting interested in the spiritual side of the equation. And some of the people who were so dead against it, and they were all just ensconced in rules and regulations and dogma and stuff like that, they're dying off, quite frankly. And the younger people haven't been inundated and conditioned in a lot of those dogmas. And they're open to the spirituality part of the equation. And the spirituality is how religions were initially formed. It was you had stained glass windows to help you in your vision feel more spiritual. You had the olfactory with the incense and candles burning and things like that. You had the beautiful music that raised the vibrational level. You had the architecture of those glorious cathedrals throughout the world where all the energy is going skyward. And that's where it all originated. It was to help us become more spiritually in tune with God, source, the universe, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Before we wrap up the podcast, I got to ask you, I keep getting drawn to your painting behind you. What is that
Yes,
building?
it's just a castle.
Really? Yeah,
I liked
yeah.
it.
I'm
Yeah,
getting drawn into
yeah.
it. It's like, wow, it's gorgeous. Anyway, I
Thank you.
digress. I
I
digress.
thought so too. Yeah. Yeah, I probably lived there in a past life. Maybe I was a duchess or a countess or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or a maid. Maybe I was the scullery maid or something.
No, fantastic. So, with that in mind, before we wrap up the podcast, is there anything you want to leave the listeners to ponder on that we've actually covered today? Because we've covered a lot of ground.
Everybody has the ability to utilize their intuitive skills, which we all come in with. And it's just a matter of developing and enhancing it. I learned how to do all this stuff. I didn't have dead people chasing me as a kid, or if I did, I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that information. So Everybody has the ability. And if you want a free copy of my book, just go to julieryangift.com, and we'll send you a free digital and audiobook copy. And we have it in Spanish too, if you prefer it in Spanish.
Oh, beautiful. It's very kind of you. And where can people go? So just URL. I'll make sure because you got the training coming up as well in October, I believe. So
Yes,
this will
yes.
go live before then. So there will be time if people want to
Oh,
jump on.
terrific.
Yeah.
AskJulieRyan.com is where you can get everything. You can get the free book there. You can get, I mean, you can buy it if you want, but I give away tens of thousands of these a year because I think this information should be taught in the schools. And there's no reason to be afraid when your loved one is at the end of their lives. And so askjulieryan.com. All my socials are Ask Julie Ryan. We have 5 YouTube channels in 5 different languages. Everything's at Ask Julie Ryan. And call into the show sometime every Thursday night at 8 Eastern. And we can do anything from the buffet of psychicness
Wow.
that you want. It's so much fun because I never know who's calling. I never know what question is going to be asked, and I never know what spirit's going to
I
say.
bet. Yeah. No, fabulous. Fabulous. Julie, lovely to connect. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And yeah, it was
Thank
beautiful.
you.
Thank you so much.
My honor.